Hello, I'm Stuart Pooley. I'd like to welcome you to my museum. It's in honor of one of the all-time greats in country music. His name is Hank Locklin. Hank Locklin was a native of McClellan, Florida in Santa Rosa County. At this time, I'd like to go over a few things that he has gave me through the years. And first of all, I'd like to tell you how I got acquainted with Hank Locklin. I got acquainted with Hank Locklin back many years ago in the early 60s. We become very close friends, and a lot of things in this museum is dedicated in his honor. I'd like to go and explain a few things now of the memorabilia and collectibles I have of this all-time great in country music. I'd also like to say he became a member of the world-famous Grand Ole Opry in 1960 until his passing in 2009. This time I'd like to go through the museum and explain a little bit of country music history that anybody in country music likes for his country music. I think you'll enjoy this tour. This time I'd like to introduce you to Hank Locklin, my dear friend. Right here is a picture of Hank Locklin from 1955. He gave me this picture in the late 60s. This was his first publicity shot with RCA Victor Records in Nashville, Tennessee. His producer was the late and great Chet Atkins, which we all can relate to. Right here is a shirt he gave me a few years before his passing also. And behind this shirt is a coat the performers in which he performed in, a jacket rather, that Hank Locklin performed in the last 15 or 20 years during his performances. As we move a little further down, I'd like to go over a few of the photographs I have, the 8x10s, and explain a little country music history, how these come about. The first one I'm pointing out is Hank with Chet Atkins, like I just mentioned, was his producer. This is a picture Hank gave me, as well as signed, commemorating his 15th year as the RCA Victor recording artist, with Chet Atkins presenting him the plaque. The next one is at a disc jockey convention in Nashville, Tennessee, at Roy Acuff Enterprises, better known as Acuff Publishing Company. This one here is from 1969. Hank Locklin was the MC at the Ernest Tubb Record Shop at the Midnight Jamboree. With him in this picture is Hank, Margie Bowes, and of course the great Loretta Lynn, and two disc jockeys from which at this time I cannot come up with a name. And here is Hank right here in this photograph. This was his last tour of Ireland in 1990. Sort of an introduction of when he went to Ireland, and sort of when he was getting ready to do a show at one of the many clubs and different places he performed. This next picture is Hank Locklin with a couple of disc jockeys from Nashville, Tennessee at a disc jockey convention in 1967. Hank had just arrived at the airport, and these two DJs was greeting him as he entered the airport headed to the convention. This is a very unique picture at the bottom here. It's not 8x10, but it has a lot of history tied to it. This picture here is with the late, great Jim Reeves, back before Jim Reeves quit wearing a hat. This is in Toronto, Canada. The DJ, Hank and Mac Wiseman, at a show in 1955 or 56 in Toronto, Canada, not long after Hank signed with RCA Victor Records in Nashville, Tennessee. This picture right here is one of my all-time favorites of Hank from 1970, publicity shot he gave me many years ago. And Here's a picture from the 80s of Hank on tour in Ireland again, which he frequented Ireland 3 or 4 times a year for many, many years. This picture here was taken of Hank Locklin at an NCO club in Germany in the middle 60s. I think 1966 would probably be the year for that. This picture here is me and Hank Locklin during one of my visits with Hank to Nashville when he lived in Nashville in 1970. Now I want to move on over to the other side over here if we can. And this picture here is Hank Locklin publicity shot when he left RCA, the only publicity shot he ever had made with MGM Records, and the great Mel Tillis was responsible for his signing with MGM Records at this time. This picture down here is from 1969 publicity shot, which was very popular publicity shot in Ireland and all over Europe at this time from 1969.
Why was he so popular in Ireland?
Irish tenor voice. His Irish tenor voice was a very unique voice. Hank Locklin first went on tour the first time in 1957. RCA sponsored this tour. Him, Jim Reeves, the Browns, Chet Atkins, and Floyd Kramer. After this tour in Europe, he caught on really fast, and his popularity it just bloomed, and from then on he was a great favorite not only in Ireland but all over Europe, such as not only Ireland but England, Scotland, Germany, all over Europe. Actually, I would veer to say that his popularity was more popular in Ireland and Scotland and England and Europe than was the U.S. in the mid-60s and early 70s. On over here a little bit on the other side, I'd like to go over a little bit of history that's very dear to me. Up here is a picture of the Jordanaires. Hank Locklin had this picture signed by the Jordanaires, and he gave it to me back in the late 60s. They backed him up on many recording sessions at RCA Victor Records, as well as the late and great Elvis Presley. This is one of the first publicity shots for Hank Locklin, also at RCA Victor Records, as well as this one here. You can see RCA Victor label, which was 2 of the first RCA publicity shots, as well as the one I showed you a little earlier. This is later in Hank Locklin's career. This was in the 80s. This is the publicity shot for the Grand Ole Opry, which was taken by my dear friend Les Leverett, which is now retired, was the official opera photographer for over 40 years at the Grand Ole Opry, as well as this one here, backstage at the Grand Ole Opry. And here is Hank Locklin with another country music great, Connie Smith, which his publicity shot was also taken by the great Les Leverett, opera photographer, in the 70s.
Here's some great albums, it looks like.
Yes, this was the last album Hank Locklin recorded for RCA Victor Records in 1974. The Mayor, appropriately titled The Mayor of McClellan, Florida. And then this was Hank Locklin's only album, LP, that he ever recorded in the gospel, as far as the gospel field, or gospel song. Only album he ever released, titled The Glory Land Way, was released in '66. The Ways of Life was released in 1963. It's got a song on this particular album called We're Gonna Go Fishing, which was a very popular song in England, even more so than the U.S.
What are his 5 top songs?
His 5 top songs is Please Help Me I'm Falling, which stayed #1 for 14 weeks in 1960. Also went to #8 in the pop field. Of course, his back pocket hit, the song he wrote in 1950, "Send Me the Pillow You Dream On," was another. It went to number 4 on the country music charts, and even went into the pop field. It scraped the pop field a little bit, but not a big seller in the pop field. The third one, "Happy Journey," which was a song that Hank Locklin recorded in 1962. He went overseas, and it was written by a German songwriter, and they had to translate it into English. First country music song was ever used with accordion in the background. It went to number 10 on the country music charts. The other one that comes to mind is one of my all-time favorites, and anybody that's ever heard it's called the Country Hall of Fame, which went to number 8 in 1967 for Hank Locklin on the country music charts. And the fifth one, "Where the Blue of the Night Meets the Gold of the Day," the old Bing Crosby theme song, topped the charts in 1969. This is probably 5 of the most popular songs he ever recorded. Of course, he had over, 26 albums to enter the charts, which I don't know right off just directly the biggest selling albums. But these songs I mentioned in the title of these albums was probably some of his best selling records.
But you have this collection is here in Baghdad, Florida.
This collection is here in Baghdad, Florida, and it was converted from a garage into a Hank Locklin Museum.
And you're just proud as can be of it.
I'm very proud.
I understand why. You even have a few photos in here that are collector's items, like you got one from Patsy Cline.
Yes, I do.
Signed the first night she was at the opera.
This was, she joined the Grand Ole Opry the same year Hank Locklin did, in 1960. They joined the same night, Grand Ole Opry, and this was a picture signed by Patsy Cline from 1960, the night she joined the world-famous Grand Ole Opry.
What are some other rare pieces you have in here?
Well,
Poster?
Hank Williams. I got a Hank Williams piece over here. It's very rare. This is from 1951. Of course, he passed away on New Year's Day, 1953. And this is a picture of the Cadillac in which he died. And this is a picture of Hank Williams during a recording session.
Now you have the poster over here that you picked up where the last performance of Hank Williams that he did not show up at.
Which he never made it to the performance, of course, his untimely death. At Canton Memorial Auditorium on New Year's Day was supposed to be the program or the show in which he died, they say, to this day on New Year's Day, according to Mr. Carr, the driver for Hank Williams.
And it says at the top of the poster, "If the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'll see you at Canton Memorial Auditorium, New Year's Day, 1953.
Right.
And that's the day he died.
Right. That's the day that, through the years, they say died New Year's Day, 1953, and his driver was a young student from Auburn University. That his daddy owned a gas station in Montgomery, and got his son to drive him on this trip. Of course, the show he never made, which, the rest is history.
Good Lord wasn't willing that day.
No, it wasn't meant to be.